Okay. It's recording, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry. Gotta pull some stuff up really quick. Okay. Bess Kalb experienced the unthinkable. She almost died. During her most vulnerable time being a new mother, she experienced a woman's worst nightmare. In her article, Without Parental Leave, I Might Be Dead, Ms. Kalb gives her experience on receiving paid parental leave and how without it, she could have lost her life. Bess was lucky enough that her employer provided her with paid maternity leave, but for so many others, that isn't the case. Paid parental leave is essential in the US and it needs to be made a priority for their citizens. Ms. Kalb provides productive discourse by showing a real life situation where paid parental leave can have a real effect on people's well-being. I believe that this is productive discourse because she's providing her story as proof that this is an essential issue. The United States is greatly lacking in its support for new and growing families. Our country is actually one of 7 nations out of the 193 in the UN that does not have some form of federal paid parental leave. In her article, Ms. Kalb points out, in quote, as it stands, the United States has no federal paid family leave benefit, and some 77% of private industry workers have no access to paid parental leave. Ms. Kalb gives a great example of what can happen to new mothers when they do not have a support they need during that fragile time. This is an ongoing and important issue, and Ms. Kalb shares her story about how this affected her personally. In her article, she has her son after a long labor and reflects on the experience of bringing her son home for the first time. She lets the reader know that she works for a company that has a union that provides paid maternity leave. She explains that she had some worrisome symptoms in her postpartum care that made her consult with her doctor. But because she didn't have to worry about, going back to work right away, so as she was recovering, she was able to listen to her body and she knew that something was wrong. In the end, she ended up having emergency surgery due to a placenta complication. And if she had ignored or waited on this issue, she could have definitely lost her life. So many new mothers do not have the same support as Ms. Kalb, and because of this, they may return to work when their body is ready, only because they need to earn income to be able to provide for their families. So this is why she's advocating for federal paid parental leave. So Ms. Kalb is using productive discourse by sharing her story on how she relied on parental leave to make sure that she had the healing that she needed. She tells her story from a very raw perspective on how she felt home and how she was feeling physically and emotionally. And she acknowledges the extreme privilege that she has by working for an employer that provides family leave. She says, in quote, the issue for me is quite personal. If I had only 4 weeks of paid leave after giving birth, I might be dead. And if I were dead, my 2-year-old son wouldn't have a semi-handmade garbage truck costume for Halloween this year. So Bess shares her story that is not as uncommon as you think. Many women experience complication after labor, or they have a really difficult healing process. Without the support of paid family leave, this could lead to women returning to the workplace before their body is fully healed. Giving her firsthand experience shows that this is a personal experience for people and engages the audience by putting them in her shoes. With any opinion piece, it can be hard to not get sucked into the emotion of the piece, and sometimes you can question the credibility of the speaker. But Ms. Kalb became prepared because she brought supportive resources to emphasize her stance on paid parental leave. This is another example of how she used productive discourse. So Ms. Kalb backs her experience up with facts which promote productive discourse. She refers to the mortality rate of mothers, especially mothers of color, and how the US has an extremely high mortality rate compared to other countries. She links the different studies that she She links the different studies that provided her with this information and how they came from credible sources. She also points out that the common misconceptions that a paid parental leave plan is anti-business. She does this by referencing the Biden administration's plan for a 12-week parental leave plan, which eventually got reduced to 4 weeks. But she also references a study done by the National Bureau of Economics Research that shows that a paid parental leave plan actually benefits business. This shows that even though it's an opinion piece, she's done her research and can appeal to people who may be more business-minded or fact-focused. So one person's story doesn't always represent every person, but having some of these resources does build her credibility. So even though Mrs. Kolb has shown productive discourse by firsthand accounts, supportive nature, and supportive facts, there could be an argument that she has also included some unproductive discourse in her article. So at the beginning of her article, she gives a hypothetical situation where a woman and a doctor are talking about how the woman has a watermelon in her stomach. And the story is kind of kitschy, and it's meant to be a metaphor on how society expects women to just bounce back after pregnancy, but it almost comes off as condescending. The article states, in quote, "You will need to be willing to sacrifice your life for the watermelon, tend to its every need, and if you don't, it'll die. You also cannot sleep more than 3 hours in a row because the watermelon needs to eat, and it's going to eat your body." End quote. I think referring to a baby as a watermelon kind of takes away the seriousness of the situation. I do not think the watermelon metaphor was that necessary because most people know the difficulties of having children. Women go through so much during their pregnancy, labor, delivery, and postpartum that I think some women would find it offensive to relate those traumatic experiences to having a watermelon. So when women get so little recognition already for the sacrifices that it takes to grow and birth and take care of a human baby. So this is an example of unproductive discourse because it doesn't show support or reliable reference material to her claim. So with this being an opinion piece, Ms. Call provides us with prime examples of how paid parental leave can affect anyone and that the U.S. is far behind on their policies compared to today's standards around the world. Bess was lucky because her employer provided her with paid maternity leave, but for so many others, they don't have that same luxury. Ms. Kolb gave us some information that was productive discourse and some that was unproductive. She provides productive discourse by showing a real-life situation where paid parental leave can have a real effect on people's well-being. But she did use some comedy and metaphors that were unnecessary to her point. But I think that we all can agree that she made us think about what we would do if we were in her situation but didn't have the same resources. The US government is turning a blind eye to a very important issue, and no matter the stipulations, something needs to change. And that's it.